We've been asked in the past, why are our protests on the International Day of Quds, why are they so anti-America? Why don't we just focus more on Israel and not talk so much about America? Gaza has shown the entire world why these protests are so anti-America. Because it's the United States government that provides the funds for all of the atrocities that we just heard about. And this is why Imam Khomeini, who declared the International Day of Quds, this is why he would say to pour all of your chants and all of your shouts upon the head of America.
And we're back. And I'm super happy to see our good friend Keith Graves back with us. Christian Warrior Training, Ultimate SEAL Team 6 Warrior Don Mann, and our own in-house 007 Jeff MD. Thanks for joining us today, guys. Appreciate your time.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So today's topic was brought up by Don, that there's a whole lot of things happening right now. This confluence of events that is essentially, destroying the Republic as we know it. So we're going to go through a bunch of different aspects of that. And at the end of this video, we'll have our top 10, 15, 20 suggestions on what people can do in light of this. But before we get into that, and since Mike Sterling is on the road today, I'm going to cover him again with the conflicted question of the day from the survivalist deck. If you had lost all of your loved ones and there was nothing else to fight for, how would you keep on surviving the apocalypse? What would drive you to keep on going if all you held dear was already gone? I think that's a good one.
Easy peasy, man. That's a good one.
It is a good one. I like it too. All right, so let's jump right in. So, number one, our country has been flooded with criminals from other countries, as well as people who've come in legally that hate our guts. So I'm going to bring up a couple posts here quickly, and I'm not going to go through all of them at once like I normally do. I'm going to go through one or two and then give everybody a chance to comment on them, and then we'll go to the following articles after that. All of these will be linked down below in the description. So there'll be a link down there to our website, and we'll have all of these links there. Reason being, as you'll see, there's articles here from Breitbart to CNN, NPR, MSNBC, everything in between. But as soon as we put any right-wing links, like a Breitbart link in the description, YouTube won't even let us save the video. It just grays it out until we remove the link. So this article here, it essentially details how the Venezuelan government is doing the same thing that Castro did in 1980, essentially emptying their prisons and sending the bad guys here. And we've actually tried to deport some people back to Venezuela, and they've turned them down. And I don't know what happened to them when they got turned down, but I know for a fact they wouldn't accept them back in again. The second news story related to this, a lot of people have come to Dearborn, Michigan legally, and they're of a different faith, and their hate for America has now escalated to the point that last weekend there was a very large public gathering where they were chanting death to America and death to Israel, and pretty brutal display for happening here on our home soil. So on that topic, Keith, since we haven't had you on a little bit, I'll go to you first. Give me your thoughts on us being flooded with all these elements that really don't like America.
So one of the things I want to bring up is a gang from Venezuela that's infiltrating America right now. I call them Tren. The cops refer to them as Tren, but it's Trende Aragua. It is a violent criminal organization. I think like MS-13 for those of you that know that one. Tren has been just infiltrating America. I'm actually getting ready to write an article about him in the Drug Intelligence Bulletin to get cops up to speed. But they are purposely being sent by the Venezuelan government because they're creating so much havoc in their country, and they know that it'll help destroy us. And what people don't realize is that these criminal groups like Tren coming into the United States, being involved in human trafficking, drug distribution. The problem is going to become at some point, we know that we're going to have a near peer conflict. When that near peer conflict happens, we all know the lights are going to get shut off for some period of time, for however long. When that happens, groups like Tren are just going to slaughter tons of Americans as they start cementing areas, or like Dearborn, right? We're actually having the same problem. I'm outside of Boise, Idaho. The next biggest population outside of Michigan for Somalis is Boise, Idaho.
Hmm.
And they don't fit into the community. There is conflict. But when those lights shut off, I don't think like people that prep and get ready for that event, I don't think they've planned for these criminal groups to now say, like, I have lived like the Somalis. How many Al-Shabaab came in with those people? Right. So how many Al-Shabaab do I have in Boise? And everybody's like, oh, everybody in Boise carries a gun. Well, absolutely. Look around me, right? Like, you know, guns are dang near a religion here in Idaho. But when those lights shut off, it's going to be a different world. They have lived in that environment for decades, and they're going to thrive. And the Americans, they don't know what it's like to live without electricity for a day, let alone for weeks.
Quick comment on Tren, Keith. 4 out of the 5 illegal immigrants who accosted the 2 NYPD a couple months ago, 4 out of the 5 were from that group.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's everybody's got their eyes on all these other issues. I'm fearful when I teach my classes, and I talk to cops every week, and I'm like, hey guys, I want you to talk me out of this. I think the lights are going to get turned off for at least 2 weeks when we have a near peer conflict. And I think all the cops are going to be so overwhelmed, they're just going to go home to their families because nobody supports them anyways. And everything's going to fall apart. 100%. They already have plans. They already know how they're going to exfiltrate back to home and just go to their families, because they know, like, it's not worth me staying here. You're prosecuting my partners for murder, for a self-defense shooting, and prosecuting me for murder. Why would I stick around when the lights are off? I'm going to go to my family. Right. You know, and it's just, we're in for a world of hurt, man. And we're just letting all these criminal aliens come in, and we're doing nothing. Nothing. I mean, it's treason. What's occurring?
yeah, it absolutely is. I can tell you, and I'm unfortunately Mike Sterling's not here to hear this, but he said, "You're never going to stop mentioning that you went to Mar-a-Lago, are you?" And I said, "No, I absolutely am not going to stop mentioning that." But interesting enough, Keith, I haven't spoken to you since then. There were 500 attendees, and I would bet that at least 25% of them were active duty law enforcement and 25% were retired law enforcement from across the country. And it's easy to have a negative mindset when we're bombarded with all this bad news day in, day out. That gala was the Border 911 gala, led by Tom Holman, who you've met, the former head, Trump's head of ICE. Cindy and I left that event with kind of a renewed sense of hope that there are some very strong, powerful people on our side that have every intention of correcting this issue of us being flooded with people who hate us. You know, God willing that we get the right guy back in the White House. But it's, I told Don the other day ago, and I've lost it again, but I had an NRA pin on my blazer that I forgot was even there. I hadn't worn that blazer since 2018, and it was at an NRA event in Dallas. And this guy comes up to me and he says, "Hey man, can I trade you for that pin?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And he says, "Well, here, I'll give you my pin." So I didn't have my readers. I couldn't read what his pin was. I stuck it in my pocket. Cindy and I get in the truck to drive home. I pull it out. ATF special agent. So, and since then, I've lost the pin again. So, but I have a picture of it. This episode of SDN is brought to you by Switch It Up, your national grid down service provider. Get a quote on a solar PV system with battery backup at switchitupinc.com or click the link in the video description below. Don, give me your thoughts on our country being flooded here.
What Keith was just saying to me, you felt so refreshed being around Mar-a-Lago and all the great people there. I feel the same when I come on your program, because you have these guests, you know, like Keith, for instance, what he just said about Trend. It's fascinating to hear. It's not good news at all, but at least we're hearing it. I have my degree in international relations. I love world affairs, international politics, international relations. I actually, as a hobby, stay tuned to it at least 2 hours a day. And when I watch mainstream news, and I'm a Fox News watcher, I've really become really disappointed because when you go to non-mainstream news, it's really the only place we're allowed to see the truth. Because what Keith just told us about trend, I've never heard on the news ever. And that's
Same
such
here.
big news. And no matter who you watch, Fox or the others, they're not allowed to say a lot. So you have to go to the non-mainstream places. One other thing I'd like to say, because of the administration, the border being wide open, Kamala Harris, a border czar, that's the biggest joke I've heard of. But we can't get the Democrats to go down to the border. And the reason is they're trying to, impeach Mayorkas right now, but they're trying to nuke that whole program so they can't be impeached. They do not want Americans to see the atrocities being committed at the border, the bodies floating in the rivers, talking to the farmers who are seeing bodies on their farms and seeing the children, the girls, the boys, the women being raped.
Yep.
I mean, the Democrats who are, I'm not trying to sound radical here, but they're evil people to allow that to happen, to allow that border to stay open and to let people like Trent come across the border. And it's all for politics and hopes that these people
Yep.
become Democrats. They're putting human lives. If you take the politics out of it and just say what is right or wrong, what normal human being would say what the Democrats are doing is right? And it's all political and it's evil.
It is.
Can I just jump on something real quick? All right.
Yeah.
So between the two of you, it's refreshing to see like-minded people, but I know people are coming, hopefully, that will win the election, that will turn things around. I'm not sure we have enough time. I do not think I think something bad is going to happen before then.
Keith, so since you weren't on the last episode when I brought up Mar-a-Lago, because I'm going to bring it up pretty much every episode of Survival Dispatch News from here on, till the next time I get to go to Mar-a-Lago. I have never seen Donald Trump ever, whether it was before, during, or after his term as president, indicate that he was overly concerned or scared of a situation. He came out and addressed us on the patio outside before we went into his home. And he said that he has grave concerns over the next 7 months and is concerned that we may not survive as a country over the next 7 months. And it took Cindy and I aback when we heard that. That was out of character for him to say that, but pretty in line with what you're saying.
My classes, I've got federal agents, I've got local law enforcement, I've got guys working NARCs, JTTF, you name it. Across the board, everybody, it's one of the things like everybody knows what's going to happen come November, and I mean, our enemies are laughing at us. Where I'm doing a video for Christian Warrior Training right now, where I'm talking about why law enforcement is failing at the active shooters around the country. And part of it is we're so busy giving pronoun training or some other, I'm not kidding. I actually have a video I put up of the Navy doing pronoun training. It is the dumbest video I've ever seen. An official U.S. Navy training video talking about proper pronoun usage. And we're doing this type of training. Our enemies know that we're in disarray. And come November, we're going to get cybered. And it's some class is going to be like, I wasn't able to vote because I couldn't drive because I didn't have gas. And then it's just going to create all this confusion. And you can guess what's going to happen next. But if you were a near peer and you were going to make your move, is that not the perfect time? When we're in disarray, hit us with a 2-week lights out scenario and then go take what you're going to do.
Two quick things, Keith. Number one, the NYPD commissioner who was active during 9/11 spoke at last week's event. Regardless of what people's beliefs or theories on and what happened on 9/11, there were 19 individuals that perpetrated the act. And he brought up some pretty scary numbers. He said, so countries where we have reciprocity, where they'll actually share information as far as their citizens and their criminal records, that chunk of people who are in the country illegally right now is 200,000 known criminals to foreign countries. That will give us the information. He said, but the problem is there's more countries that won't give us the information than ones who do give us the information. So if there are 200,000 known criminals from other countries, what's the unknown? Just, how extreme is that number? And then before we move on, you brought up the Navy. And at Jeff's request, this would be an appropriate time for me to raise this. So Jeff, would you want to comment on this issue that was well publicized on X and then got taken down by the U.S. Navy?
This is the captain of the USS McCain. And as you can tell by the brass flying that he's actually firing the weapon. And people said, okay, doesn't know how to hold it, doesn't know how to fire. And the funniest thing is the optics are on backwards and the lens cap is on. So what the hell is he shooting at?
So what I find particularly funny, Keith, is that somebody has to have their hand on his shoulder because of the vicious kickback of a 5.56.
Well, yeah, when you're holding it wrong, there is a vicious kickback.
So I mean, we'll get back on topic here, but Don, Jeff specifically asked me to bring this up so he could take a,
Actually, I was going to do it before we went on here, but okay.
Bump there. So
Jeff likes picking on the Navy.
I like picking on the Navy.
Okay, I'm an American. I'm a pure American, red, white, and blue, all the way. I've never felt the way I feel right now, but for what Biden's administration and people like him, Obama, those people, what they've done to our country, really, just in 3 years, you could almost say they're responsible for millions of deaths in 3 years worldwide.
Yes.
Because for right now, the Shiites and the Sunni have always been at war with each other. But now they've all galvanized against the U.S. Right now, the last statistic I heard is 95% of the world is against the U.S. and Israel right now. The other thing with Ukraine, okay, yeah, we didn't lose an American on Ukraine's soil, but we certainly funded Ukraine to fight the Russians. And we funded them. Now might be 600 deaths there. And they want to send this other $60 billion there. And by all accounts, it's really not going to do anything. It's just going to keep the death toll going up and up and up. So we have, thousands of nuclear weapons now in the world. We had the first two, but now we've got these thousands of nuclear weapons. I believe, I am sure to say, I'm very confident saying today is the most dangerous day we've ever had in the history of this world. And tomorrow is going to be more dangerous. And what's going on now that Ramadan is over, who knows what Iran's going to do when they strike back to the Israelis. And then Netanyahu, if he fires back into Iran or Hezbollah or Lebanon, and he brings us into a regional war, we're going to be dragged into it. And I don't get that from mainstream news. I watch that from the non-alternative news. And I feel right now what our administration, and I don't even like to call him the president, what our administration has done to our country, he's just killing a lot of people and getting all these people around the world and all these countries against us. 31 countries now want to sign with BRICS. NATO's shrinking up to nothing. European Union's pretty much shrinking up to nothing. We're having the world as our enemy right now. I used to be proud to walk around the world saying, I'm an American. Whenever I'd travel around the country, I'd look at it as a U.S. appreciation tour. We have it so much better here. I am so proud to go out and say I'm an American. But now with this administration, I don't feel like that right now. And I can't wait for the tide to turn in November. I don't think it's going to make a big difference, but it's going to make a difference.
Don, everything that they said Trump was going to do if he stayed president is what Biden is doing right now.
Actually, that's a good segue to what I was going to mention. There was an article that was talking about their tyranny, and it's being disguised as democracy. And everything they're doing is and they say, just look at Brazil. Brazil is going completely, tyrannical because they've got a Supreme Court justice who wants to put Elon Musk in jail for not censoring people. And they said, what's happening there is going to come here. It says, but you wrap it all in, this is for democracy. Well, what have they done for democracy here? They've tried to put Trump in jail. They've put hundreds of other people in jail. They have censored people. They have sent the FBI to kick in the door of somebody because he was protesting out in front of an abortion clinic. I mean, they're like Stalin. I mean, and then you have, I hate to say it, I've worked with the FBI. There's still some good dudes there, but the FBI has become the KGB. It's the sword and the shield of the Democrat Party. And the border mess, what people, Chris had mentioned, they want all these illegals to become Democrats. They don't have to be. All they have to do is count them in the census. And if you wonder why they're all going to California, New York, Chicago, that's on purpose. What states are losing population and therefore losing representation in Congress? Accordingly, California, Illinois, New York, they count the illegals because the census only counts people. If you put an extra million illegals in California, that's 2 congressional seats. Now, they don't have to run for office. They don't even have to vote. But when they reapportion, California will pick up more seats. And that also means more electoral votes in the next election.
Remember, I saw...
we don't correct this by 2030 when the next census comes around, or pass a law that says you can only count U.S. citizens for apportionment, we're hosed.
Well, number one, Trump tried to do that and got shot down in court. But based on the 2020 census and people who are not in this country legally, there were 28 seats in the House of Representatives that went to the Democrats that should have gone to red states.
Yeah.
So absolutely, it's a thing. So speaking of red, that's a good point to move on to the next set of links here. So the next topic, as we discuss this, implosion that we're witnessing of our country, is terror sleeper cells here. We've known this for years. Don's been on before and mentioned many times that we had lots of intel going back into the 90s relative to Hezbollah and other sleeper cells. And we've discussed it at length as well. And the problem with when these guys get activated, it's going to wreak havoc. Like Keith said, no power, say, for a couple of weeks, comms going down, all of these things. I've lost track now of how many times Christopher Wray has announced publicly, whether it be in Congress or not, that attacks on the homeland are imminent. And I feel that they're doing this to basically say, see, we told you so. It's not our fault. I mean, I don't know. I don't think they have altruistic reasons. Keith?
So I got to tell you, I am very concerned about those people. I want to talk about 2 things. I want to talk about this, but I also want to talk about lone wolves that are inspired by these dirtbags. But look, going back to these guys, I am so concerned about what's going on. I drive around with Kit. I drive around with just like I was on patrol and I'm back on the team. I have my helmet, plate carrier. I got my rifle and I've got stuff to identify myself. And I do it because, I am in a somewhat rural area. So if something does happen at the church or something like that, I don't have to, I'm going to rely on I don't want to say I'm going to rely on the police. I love the police, obviously, because I was the police, but I also know that they have no support, no training, and they're getting screwed. And so they're not going to be as capable as they were 20 years ago. Okay. And that's I'm not bashing the cops by any stretch of the imagination. I'm actually supporting you that you're getting screwed. Right. So I am going with cop isn't going to show up for a while and I'm going to take care of this right now. Right. The other issue is this lone wolf. And a lot of people are like, oh, you're in rural Idaho. What do you worry about? Just this week, kid in Coeur d'Alene was picked up because he's an ISIS sympathizer. And his plan was to go shoot up a church in Idaho, in Coeur d'Alene. If you've never been there, it depends on where this kid lives. He was going to do it close to his house. When you say Coeur d'Alene, that encompasses a larger area, right? Because you have unincorporated. It doesn't matter where you are. You better have some plan to be self-sufficient. You cannot rely on does your government inspire confidence that they're going to take care of you? Right. I don't, I have no confidence anymore. And it's like nobody hates the government more than government employees because you see how the sausage is made and you realize how screwed up it is. So I am self-reliant. If something bad happens, I have more than a fire team at my house that's fully equipped, that is trained. I have people from SOF. I have SWAT guys. I'm good. I even got my neighbor's even a doctor. I am squared away. I got a nurse practitioner. They're all going to collapse back to my house. We're good. We don't need you. We'll take care of our own problem. Because imagine when this kicks off for 2 weeks, not being able to call because you just shot somebody trying to break in your house. And now you got this body in front of your house. Like, what are you going to do?
Shovel.
Lop his head off and put it on a stake in the front yard to warn everybody.
Well, but then you bury the corpse.
Right, but I mean,
in Jeff's case, he's just going to feed them to his javelinas.
Yeah, the javelina will take care of that. And coyotes and yeah.
Oh, you're close to the border. I thought you'd have a chupacabra or something.
We don't talk about that. They're illegal.
But I mean, not to get like, a lot of people look at that and go, oh, that's over the top. Is it? The government's been warning you that this is going to happen. The government's been warning you, you are going to be attacked. You have ads in New York City telling you how to be safe from a nuclear attack. Okay, do you think somebody did that on their own? No, man, they're doing that because they're worried and they're letting people know. I mean, none of it was helpful. It was all horrible stuff like go hide in the building. Man, there's a lot more to it than that. Okay, but especially if you live in New York City. But like, you have to watch what Christopher, and I do not trust the FBI. Okay. And there are some good FBI people. They're in my class every week. And I always ask them, why aren't you doing anything? Okay. Why aren't you trying to overthrow this horror, like not overthrow the government, but like overthrow your poor leadership? Like,
because they're too busy accusing the four of us and everybody else who looks like us as being the number one threat to the country.
Exactly. And so look, when these people are saying this, you need to listen because they're covering their ass. They're afraid. And you need to prepare for that. And how do you prepare for that? I'm my own police department, fire department. I'm my own hospital. I'm my own grocery store. And you need to figure out what that encompasses and get all that together.
This ties into the first one. You talk about the gangs from Venezuela. Okay, if shit hits the fan, say power goes out, and they mobilize the National Guard. Well, where do you think the National Guard's going to end up? It's going to end up in cities. It's not going to be in a small town. It's not going to be a rural area. You're really going to be on your own out there. But also, when that happens, all those gangs, like Key said, they're going to come out of the woodwork like cockroaches. And sounds morbid. The only bright side to that is they're probably going to go into the cities first. And those are the people who voted for this crap. So it's only fair that they're the ones that suffer first. But when they get done there, they're going to move out.
So a good point. What I do, I want to give a shout out to the guys at Forward Observer. They got a great class called Doing an Area Study. Yeah. And I've known about that just being a narc, doing your preliminary checks. But for my area, I have 2 state prisons and then another state prison because I'm 40 miles from Oregon. I've got another state prison right on that border that houses mainly sexual offenders. Okay. And then I've got an entire Somali population, including one that houses a compound of Somalis that refuses to let police in, interact with police, and people routinely hear explosions and gunfire coming from that compound. Okay. So when I look at my area, I know I've got 3 state prisons that people are going to go let those people out when the lights come off. They're going to let them out, and those people are going to go on a rampage, and they're going to be organized, right? And then I got those Somalis that I got to deal with, okay, which not all of them are going to be bad, but there's some Al-Shabaab in there, okay? And so I worry about that. How am I going to deal with that? I've got it. I've got my neighborhood is organized. We can make our place a hard target. People will have to bypass us and move on. And you need to figure out how you're going to do that for yourself as well. And how it starts is go to Costco and go to whatever grocery store, the best place you can go, LDS, go look up the LDS website, Latter-day Saints. They have, they actually sell pre-canned dehydrated food that lasts for 30 years. And it's super cheap. Go over there. They're going to proselytize to you. Just say, no, thanks. I'm a Christian. That'll offend them. And then go ahead and get what you need. Right. and then head back home. And then you go to all your neighbors. Like we have a neighborhood group on Facebook. Hey, if I just put out a message, if any of you are concerned about what's happening in America and you worry about our neighborhood and you want to help strengthen our neighborhood, send me a private message. I was inundated by everybody in the neighborhood. And all they needed was leadership, which we can all provide. And now you tell, we'll meet down at the park by the pool, and then we'll talk about it. And we start talking about what we're going to do, whose responsibility for what, and you take it from there. It's super easy to organize.
Yeah, that's great advice, Keith. Jeff, Don, do you want to add anything before we go to the next segment?
Keith, you probably are familiar with that. Hezbollah has set up some black ops sites. They're actually sleeper cells from Hezbollah, and they're in the United States. And I guess the number of them have been arrested 7, 8 years ago. And they were trained to be suicide bombers and let loose in our cities. One of them was let loose to blow himself up, but he's looking for a target. Fortunately, the FBI caught him and he's in prison. But they've caught a number of these guys, black ops units from Hezbollah, and this is 7 or 8 years ago, before we started really talking about that. And so the terrorist watch list, the FBI, when they're not busy, monitoring our school board meetings and keeping a contact on parents, they are doing some good out there. I know, and I know not the leadership's not any good, but I know the lower level guys, the workers are doing a great job. But these sleeper cell guys, and coming to an area like yours, I didn't know it was that bad in the Idaho section. But I do know, I've talked to some cops. When they hear the shooting in the Somalia regions, they're not allowed to go in there. They don't go in there at all. And these people are, I know they're Wisconsin now too, right? Michigan.
Oh, they're called no-go zones for the cops. And it's because they're so violent. And it's not just the areas with some of the people from other countries, that group up. But my first experience was I was in a car chase with some Stockton police officers. We were doing some specialized training. We came into this one neighborhood, they stopped, and we're 4 deep with cops. And they stop, and the guy goes into the neighborhood. And I'm like, what are we doing? They're like, that's a no-go zone, man. We got to wait for more people to get here. They waited till 4 more units, and then we came in all together. And it was almost like an operation if you were in Somalia, where when we finally stopped where the guy's car was, you had certain guys come out and their 360-degree perimeter around us. So then we can go in and do our job. And I was like, this is insane. This is crazy, right? Well, we have no-go zones even in Boise. The city administration will tell you that's not true. The chief will tell you that's not true. But the cops will tell you there are Somali apartment complexes that you don't go into by yourself, that you have to wait till 4 officers show up so you can have 360 cover and then deal with what you're going to deal with. That happens in all American cities.
And get back on the terrorism thing a little bit. Well, that's a terrorism thing too. I in my career, I had the opportunity to go into the Atlanta Federal Pen and interview a convicted terrorist who was planning to do a suicide bombing but got busted. A guy named Ghazi Abu Mezer. He was in New York City. Mm-hmm. If you met the guy, and actually it sounds weird, I actually liked him. Mm-hmm. He was an interesting little guy. He had a life. He had worked in bars, and he had all these pictures of his friends and stuff. And like he had a social life. And I was like, why in the hell did you give all that up to go blow up a subway bus, a subway station? And he just said, I just got wrapped up in it. You meet the wrong people, they get you worked up. But if you met him and talked to him on the street, you would think, okay, he's an Arab guy who's never going to blow anything up. He's just a good dude. He loves it in America. He has his friends. He drinks. He parties. But man, they converted his ass. And now he's spending the rest of his life behind bars.
Good.
But which is good. But it can be anyone.
Absolutely.
Jeff, I always tell people you're the smartest guy I know. But really, there's one guy I met who's smarter. And that's Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the guy who bombed us on 9/11, the mastermind. They call him Al-Muqta, the mastermind. That guy is so intelligent, and he would sit with the interrogators, and I'd be in the room with him. And they would say, why would you want to kill all those people on 9/11? You killed 3,000 people. Why did you do that? And his eyes would lighten up. He said, I kill the infidel. I kill the infidel. It's good. It's good for me. It's good for Allah. It's good for Muhammad. I kill the infidel. And the people interrogate him and say, but you know, you're killing a lot of Muslims as well. That's okay. We are allowed that we can kill Muslims as well, as long as we take out a lot of infidels. What about the women and children you're killing? He said, that's okay. The children grow up and they become our enemy. It's good to kill children. And he's saying this with this gleam in his eye, like he's excited. And women, no, we kill the women too. And because the women support the men, the infidel men. And then he acknowledged for the first time the US heard about it, is he's the one who cut off Daniel Pearl's head. And he got so excited when he was talking about this. And everybody was saying, oh my God, he's the one who cut off Daniel Pearl's head. And then one of the guys asked him, was it difficult? He goes, no, no. You know, once I got through his voice box, the screaming stopped. It was only hard to get through his spine, but he was so happy about it. But like you were saying, Jeff, if you talk to him, you would think, what an intelligent man, what an easygoing, nice going man. But there's something inside of him. We call it evil. They call it something different. Like he's the mastermind of the enemy that wants to come destroy us. And it was something I'll never, ever forget, where you can see somebody like that and not know that's all inside of them. And he being the master of them all.
Well, Adolf Hitler was like that. There was former director of the CIA, was a cub reporter in 1936 at the Olympics, and was actually invited to Hitler's castle with a bunch of other reporters, and they just sat around and talked. And he said, because he's probably the only director of CIA that actually met Hitler, he said, one of the most charming people you would ever meet. You had no idea what was going on inside that rotted skull of his. But on the surface, he was charming, he was friendly, he was joking, and you would never know that he was one of the most evil people who ever lived. So, yeah, you can't judge people by appearances.
No, very true. Don, I forgot to mention that one of your compatriots was at Mar-a-Lago last week and spoke, Rob O'Neill.
Oh, was he? He was there? Oh, good,
Yeah,
good.
he gave a great speech. For those people who don't recognize the name, that's the SEAL who took out bin Laden. And he went through the entire story, Don, in great detail, more than I've ever heard or seen before. That was it was a pretty moving speech given on his part.
You know, I went to the 9/11 memorial with him when he came out and told the country it was him. And it was moving. I mean, there were a lot of people in the audience who said, hey, my brother was killed. My brother jumped out the window. And this big man would jump out of the audience and grab Rob. And he says, the devil killed my brother and you killed the devil. I love you. And I mean, it was super emotional. And then what Rob did when he shot bin Laden, he was wearing this cami shirt with a subdued flag. And I was right there with Rob. Rob wanted a SEAL to be with him. And I was so happy to be the SEAL who was with him. And the last thing bin Laden saw was Rob's weapon, his left arm, and the subdued patch. But Rob gave that to the 9/11 memorial, the museum. And now when you go through it, it's the last thing you see. When you go through the whole memorial, you'll see Rob's shirt up there. Yeah, I heard that story a number of times from Rob, a number of times, a few drinks, a lot of drinks, and super, super. I mean, you just feel it here every time you hear it. I'm
Yeah,
glad he's doing well.
He was the only person who spoke last week that got a standing ovation, by the way. And there were some big names: Sebastian Gork, Kash Patel, Vivek Ramaswamy, like some really big names. But when Rob spoke, everybody stopped talking. You could hear a pin drop, and appropriately he got a standing ovation. So, moving on to the next part of the destruction of America. And we've touched on this previously. So at a bare minimum, the authorities are telling us that there are somewhere around 30,000 Chinese special ops soldiers in the country. Just from October till January, there were 20,000 of them alone, just during that one period. So 30,000 may be a little bit low. This just happened a couple weeks ago. And this Chinese person here is part of the CCP, People's Republic Army. And he spilled the beans, not initially, but after, being interrogated for a while. And it really, brought into focus just how many of them are here. These are very specially trained soldiers. You can go back, to last year. Newsweek would be considered pretty left wing. And they've got actually a series, not just this article on Chinese special ops soldiers here. This is one day, and this was earlier this year, February this year. They arrested 269 Chinese migrants, and if you read through the article, you'll see that many of them were identified as Chinese soldiers. There's another article. This goes back exactly a year ago when people first started ringing alarm bells over this. And even in Christopher Wray's most recent speech, actually, this is the one before his most recent one, he even hit on the fact that these are Chinese special ops soldiers who are specifically trained to bring down our infrastructure. So not special forces like SEALs and Green Berets, but special ops guys who specialize in wrecking our infrastructure. And the Chinese have bragged multiple times that they have access to 24 of our primary network / infrastructure. So that's power grids, data centers, cellular networks, the whole 9 yards. Keith, let's start with you on this as far as these special ops plants.
So a lot of people will want to dismiss this and say it's not true. As you guys know, I train cops all over the country every week, and Border Patrol is represented in a lot of those classes. And they are confirming to me 100% that they are personally have hands-on people they have confirmed are PLA. And not just PLA, but we're talking like also Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and go on to the list of the people, including Russian special forces. It is occurring 100%. And I got to tell you that the border guard, the Border Patrol guys are militant about what's happening, and we need to do something because they are literally being handcuffed and prevented from doing their job. And they're using these countries, China, Russia, Iran, are using our open border as a tool to create discord and chaos in our country by pushing these people through and funding these NGOs that tell people how to come in here so that our Border Patrol is overwhelmed and these other people slip through. And people need to ask themselves, what's going to happen when those lights, because the lights are going to turn off. You have to realize that. And when they turn off, hopefully it's only for 2 weeks and not longer. When that happens, what are those people going to do? I talked about my area. You have to do an area study of your area to find out what your problems are. But I've got the Somalis. I've got 3 prisons. Now I want you to add in Chinese Special Forces, because I also have Mountain Home Air Base, okay, in Gowan Field, and they're both strategic. And then I got the INL, the Idaho National Laboratory, okay. I've got all these big things. Now I got to worry about Chinese Special Forces on top of all this stuff. And it goes back to our government, meaning Biden, knows what's going on. They are absolute traitorous for not dealing with this problem. And we're still, as a people, we're doing nothing. I mean, I know one day the FBI is going to show up to my door for a knock and talk because of the things I've been saying. And I cannot wait because I'm going to clown the shit out of them. It's going to make a great YouTube video. I can't wait for it to happen. So I look forward to my agent that's watching right now. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person. But look, man, like people got to realize like, what are you doing to get ready for this? Because you have tons of warning.
Yeah.
Jeff?
Well, my wife always says, the FBI is going to be at our door. And that's why I have a big double security door on my front door. So if I have to, I can talk to them through a extruded metal screen. But yeah, I think people, you really need to look around you at what potential threats like the prisons and things, but also you got to look at what assets are around you that are going to get a hell of a lot higher priority than you. Idaho National Labs. Yeah, if there's going to be National Guard protecting something, it's going to be the nuclear facility. Here in Tucson, we have, Davis Monthan Air Force Base. To the south, we have Fort Huachuca. They have troops and they have, capabilities, but they also have a lot to protect. tactical aircraft, things like that. They're not going to be patrolling your neighborhoods. They're going to be locking down the base. And that means that's where the majority of those military people are going to be. It's going to be the National Guard that the governor calls up that might patrol the streets. But thing is, if everything goes down, how do you call them up? If you don't have cell phones, the phone system goes off. How do you activate those guys?
And the guard is going to worry about.
Are they going to want to show up and leave their family unprotected? Same thing with the cops. So you got to protect yourself and organize your neighbors to protect your neighborhood.
Yep. Don?
We saw what happened when Hamas cut through the gates, came through and attacked Israel. And we saw the atrocities that happened there. But that was an enclosed, encapsulated area, Gaza, the Gaza Strip there. Hamas and supporters came through. But if we don't think much, much worse than that can happen here, because we have all these sleeper cells, like Keith just explained, all the folks he just talked about, the Chinese, the Afghans, all these sleeper cells in our country, those people who attacked Israel weren't in Israel. They had to break through that security. The intel and the security Israel has is pretty much top notch, or at least we thought it was. They were still able to break through, cause all that damage, and now we're maybe coming to a regional war because of it. But what can happen in our country could be so much worse than that attack, and it can happen tomorrow. And unless more Americans like us see this happening, we're really in big, big trouble. And that's why I think today's the most dangerous time the planet's ever seen, and tomorrow's going to get worse. This threat's building and building and building. And I'm so glad there's programs like yours, Chris, because this is a way to spread the word, because people aren't learning this any other way.
Yeah. And
it's funny. I am getting a ton of comments from people that are reaching out and contacting me. Hey, I saw you guys on Survival Dispatch talking about this, right? And they're all making comments and they're all sending me on my page, let alone I'm sure Chris is getting a ton of them on his.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, we're reaching a ton of people for being, shortlisted by YouTube. We're still reaching a ton of people that are they're listening to what we're saying and taking it as the word of gospel to do it.
Yeah. I mean, you look at Israel where they had to bulldoze through a wall or fly in on a paraglider to get to their victims. Here, all you got to do is just walk into a school. 2 guys with AKs walking into a school. What kind of damage can they do? And then multiply that by 1,000. If that happened 1,000 times, especially if it happened in the course of a couple of days, what would happen to this country?
Yeah.
We would just freak out, and rightfully so.
You'd end up with the complete collapse. There'd be no rule of law.
No.
Go to a Starbucks in any urban city, buy a cup of coffee, sit down and watch the clients and see who is worthy of defending themselves, who can take care of themselves. Most of them can't figure out what gender they are, let alone how to scavenge for food if they can't get it. I mean, if you identify yourself as a they, them, good luck, man. You're going to have a hard time in the apocalypse.
So I'm going to date all of us here, but do you remember in the 80s on Saturday Night Live, the segment done that was called Pat?
Pat, yeah.
So Cindy and I play that game rather frequently these days, and it's typically the younger generation. And for those who don't remember Pat from Saturday Night Live, it was this character that you could never tell if it was male or female. It was just Pat. So,
it's Pat.
Yeah. It's just Pat.
So there's a whole lot of low testosterone Pats out there that we can't identify one way or the other. But I
see these little skinny soy boys with purple hair and nose rings, and the first thing I think is, when the zombie apocalypse happens, they're food. They're not going to survive.
I think the greatest generation, everybody just went to the war and defended our country. They came home, went right back to work. Mm-hmm. And now if that ever, or when that's going to happen again, look at the people who are going to fight for our country.
Yeah.
Don, remember 9/11?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
No, 9/11, look at 9/12. Look at 9/10, 9/11, 9/12. 9/10 to 9/11, huge difference, right? 9/12, all these people signing up. I had tons of friends that signed up that day. because they were pissed. I look at, if we're going to have a near peer conflict, we are going to have one. But when that happens, we're going to have to do a draft.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
And China plays the long game, flooding us with fentanyl. And then also, they're now all, I don't know if people know this, but all the marijuana grows in America, all the illicit marijuana grows are all Chinese operated, not cartel anymore. And then the money in our money laundering class, we show how it's flowing from New York into Chinese banks and then being funneled back. They're playing the long game. They have destroyed an entire generation of military age fighting males.
So on that topic, before we move on, my wife is fanatical when it comes to what we eat and what's in our food and what we buy. And, you know, the average 20-year-old today has the same testosterone level that a 70-year-old man had 20 years ago. And it's quite visible in many instances, but it's due primarily to the poisoning of our food supply, which the Chinese have played a role in. What's interesting is if you take two products or one product in two different locations, America and let's say somewhere in Europe, and you look at the list of ingredients, the American concoction is full of all kinds of chemicals. And the Europeans, they don't allow food companies to do that. So you're 100% right. They've destroyed a generation by multiple means, but especially through poisoning our food supply. And, you know, you use the term soy boy. What's some people don't know, but most of us know, is that when you crank up your ingestion of soy, it specifically shuts down testosterone production. It will literally turn a male into a female. Estrogen goes up, testosterone goes down. I think it's about 2 cups of soy milk a day or more. But soy's in everything now. Every food product is contaminated.
There are chemicals in naturally occurring chemicals in soybeans that mimic estrogen.
Right.
And it's just like there's a lot of these things that are so close to each other. Yeah, like cortisone. You know, you get it shot in your knee, but cortisone is actually chemically very similar to testosterone, and your body will sometimes interpret it as testosterone. That's why women who are on cortisone may start getting, you know, facial hair, you know, little mustache, that kind of stuff. Same thing is true for soy and estrogen. Yeah. It drives down estrogen or testosterone levels.
Yeah, it's an absolute crime what they've done. So moving on, the next two topics or aspects I'm going to kind of merge together, and these are 100% in Keith's wheelhouse. So George Soros has essentially replaced BLM with these pro-Hamas demonstrators. And I'm saying pro-Hamas because there's multiple instances of these riots across the country where the participants specifically state that they're happy to see what happened on October 7th in Israel. And you have to be an evil SOB to think that it's okay to, you know, dismember, rape, and do all the horrible things that were done. So number one, we've got Soros backing these pro-Hamas groups. The most recent one was this week when 50 of them stormed the cafeteria at the U.S. Senate, causing a complete shutdown. Actually, sorry, 50 were arrested. More than that stormed it. And it actually says right in the article, and this is one of many articles on the subject, these were pro-Hamas demonstrators. Keith can speak to how they are paid by George Soros, but it directly dovetails into the next part, which is short staffing, especially in blue jurisdictions across the country for police. So, and Keith's already touched on this, and I won't go through all these again. There'll be a link down below, takes you to our website, so you can read and watch all this stuff if you so choose. Keith, let's start with you because you've arrested these people who are professional protesters that are getting paid by George Soros. Stitch that together with this lack of resources for law enforcement agencies.
So the pro-Hamas riots aren't really about Hamas, and people need to realize that. What it really is about November. And what they're doing is they are doing after action reports. They're looking like when they attacked the White House, they looked at which agencies responded, how many responded, how long did it take them to get there? What kind of force did they use? What about us when we try to recruit protesters to come? What worked best to get the protesters there? And all of that is in preparation for what's coming up in November. when things don't go their way or they're trying to push it a certain way, right? And so that's more of it's George Soros's way of monitoring what's going to work when we really need to push people out. So the way it works is they'll literally do a Craigslist ad looking for paid protesters. And I've answered them undercover. I've answered them and then gone, and they offer you a certain amount of money to come out and protest. And when you arrest these people, you ask, hey, what's your job title? Because you ask like employment stuff, and they'll say professional protester. They'll just come out and say it. That's their job. That's what they do. And it doesn't matter the cause. Their job is to wreak havoc, right? Going back to law enforcement staffing, look, I don't think people understand how miserable it is. Like it used to be like, I remember being on SWAT and patrols holding down this bad guy's house. And now SWAT comes up and literally the neighborhood applauds. Like, yeah, that boy's going to get his butt kicked. Yeah. Like, you know, the guys are here. And then now everybody's pulling their phone out to videotape you so that they can try and make $1 million in a lawsuit. And you have law enforcement leadership that has abandoned the cop on the street. And then you have George Soros-backed DAs that are prosecuting cops for defending their lives or the lives of somebody else. And a clear, just clearly they're trying to save somebody and they get prosecuted for murder. They're taking away cops' ability to arrest people, right? So like, I don't know if people realize in California, it's not reasonable force anymore. Like people say cops have more rights than me. No, you actually have more rights than the cop. You have reasonable force, meaning what would a reasonable person have done to defend themselves in an attack on the street? For that cop, it's necessary force, which means you really can't use deadly force, right? Because you could have talked to them, you could have done all this other stuff. And so now cops are getting shot, injured, and they're not being taken care of. I mean, I've been out for 5 years and I'm still fighting work comp on stuff 5 years later. Well, why would you put up with that? I can go to Google and get a job at Google making more money. So we've lost the people that look at it as a noble job. And the people that are putting in for it are people we wouldn't have hired 10 years ago. People that lie on the entrance examination, people that do drugs, people that have violent history. I mean, Detroit PD just put out a video saying they will help, a recruiting video saying they will help you clear your warrants so you can get a job. Right. And so do you want to work with those people? I don't. I mean, I'm not going to go there. And look, the recruiting crisis, it's not going away. 100%. It is not going to go away. It's going to take us, me and a friend sat down over drinks trying to figure out, all right, we're in charge of all police all over the country. And everybody agrees with what we want to do. There's nobody's going to stop us from what we want to do. 10 years minimum to get out of where we're at right now. 10 years. And nobody will let us do whatever we want. So you are going to be left unprotected or have incompetent people coming to show up to help you is the way it's going.
Which could be worse. It was like those two police officers, I don't know where it was, the woman answered, they called the police, they answered the door, and they unloaded on this poor woman. I think they shot like
Fort Worth
rounds and hit her like twice, I think. But
yes.
Yeah. And that's, people are like, they shouldn't have been cops.
So what you look at, what I always ask when those incidents happen, I will always call somebody from that department and say, were they post 2020 cops? We call them COVID cops. Were they post 2020? Almost, I have not had one yet that was not a COVID cop. And because all of us that have really 2014 is when police work went downhill, when it was Michael Brown, Obama, and all these people that just made it miserable for us. And look, I mean, like people listening, you've got to do something to turn this around. And how you do it is how you treat your cops and make it so that like people that went into it were people like me. I'm just here to help people. I'm here because like Don went into the military because it was noble. You went into the CIA because it was noble. You weren't going to become rich. No, you were going to defeat America's enemies and live what you grew up looking at is like, those guys are awesome. And we've taken that away.
Well, there's the case in Chicago that happened a couple of days ago. They pulled some guy over. He started shooting at the cops. He shot one. There were more cops than him. He lost the fight and, ended up getting killed. all the stories were, oh, this poor guy, he was just out driving his new car. He's just an innocent guy. The cop shot it. Well, then you show the body cam, and which shows the real story. And they come up and they're being polite. They're saying, roll down the window. He rolls it down. And he starts to roll it back up. And they're like, no, no, unlock the doors. And, and then he shot first. He grabbed his gun and started shooting, exited the car, started shooting at more cops. And then he gets it. But that is being portrayed as some abuse of police power. He shot first. They were polite. All he had to do was roll down his window and answer their questions. But instead, now he's dead and there's another cop who got shot.
Yeah, and we're left with a situation that Keith mentioned earlier today. You are your own first responder, whether it's the cops, fire department, paramedics. You're number one. You're the person who has to respond to it. So,
Chris, I got to tell you, in my classes, I get a complaint every week. Every week, somebody complains. He called drug users tweakers. That was the last one that I called somebody a tweaker. They called themselves tweakers. Tweaker is in the dictionary. Come on, man. Or like, he's teaching people to be brutal. No, man, I'm telling them how to be fucking cops. Sorry for the language. I'm telling them how to be cops. I'm telling them how to make arrests. Like, look, man, I don't teach nice subjects. I teach subjects where, like, I mean, like, you're doing action. You're doing cool guy stuff. You become a cop for that reason, and the complaints, I never had them 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was like, everybody's like, yeah, like, let's go do it. And then now it's like, you've got these post 2020 guys that are in law enforcement because they truly believe they can change law enforcement. And then they come in and complain. He's racially biased. He called somebody an addict. That was another one I got 2 weeks ago. He called somebody an addict. Yeah, they call themselves addicts. It's an addiction, right? That I mean, honestly, I'm getting ready to stop training cops because it's pissing me off constantly.
As long as you don't cross that line, and start messing with their acorns, you're probably okay. You get away with the rest of it.
Post 2020 cop right there. That was a post 2020 hire.
Only here in Florida, right? I've split my life pretty much between North Texas and Central Florida, and when the portions of my life in North Texas, a friend of mine, he would always text me and say, hey, did you hear this? Did you hear that? And it was some crazy headline. And I'd say, no, I hadn't heard that. But based on the headline, it had to happen in Florida. And I was right every single time. Florida man is a real thing. So
yep.
Anyway, just to pull some of this stuff together. So we put together a top 10 list of things that our audience can do in light of this confluence of shitty things that are happening in our society that's leading to the downfall of the republic. I'm going to go through the 10 really fast and then have each of y'all weigh in on it. And then we'll wrap up with the conflicted question. So number one, and Keith's a poster child for this, move to the country if you can. So get out of the dense urban areas and get to the country if at all possible. If you can't do that, establish a bug out location, friends, family, even rent a storage unit in a rural area, stock it full of stuff and get there as fast as you can, which of course requires a bug out plan. Otherwise, you're going to be bugging in. Lord only knows how that's going to work if it's a Teotihuacan situation, the end of the world as we know it. Avoid large gatherings, especially outdoor venues. Very anti-American to even suggest doing so. But at the current height of things, the threats and very specific threats on the part of Iran and Hezbollah and other countries who hate us, they are targeting large public outdoor venues. Number 4, this will get absolutely nowhere because anytime a survival prepping channel mentions this, it tanks hard, but improve your fitness level. If you could do anything, like a short walk, a handful of push-ups, or adopt Tony Blauer's strategy, stop at the top of each hour, do 5 push-ups if that's what you can do. Do 10 push-ups if that's what you can do. And if you do that over the course of the day, say for 8 hours, 5 days a week, and you add it up, you're talking tens of thousands of push-ups over the course of a year. You will move the needle. You will improve your station in life as far as your fitness is concerned. Number 5, get professional training, or if you cannot afford that professional training, study it online, especially videos, and mimic it to the best of your ability in your backyard, friend's property, wherever you possibly can. We understand that not everybody can pay for high-end professional training. practice on a regular basis. So all survival skills, not just shooting, are perishable skills. If you don't practice them, don't use it or lose it, sort of thing. So especially as far as dry fire training, live fire training, those sort of things, the more you do, the better you'll be. And like Mike Sterling likes to say, human beings do not rise to the occasion, they fall to their level of training. Stack up on your basics: food, water, meds, med kits, and ammunition. Set aside cash, preferably in smaller bills, so that you're not waving $100 bills in somebody's face as you're trying to purchase something post SHTF. Set aside vices to barter with, especially booze and cigarettes. People will do anything for those things. You know, we're not big drinkers. We might have a handful of drinks over the course of the year. I wouldn't have any problems whatsoever saying, here, take this whiskey for whatever, you know, they're offering. Last one, refine your home defense plan and practice it on a regular basis. So you can go to survivaldispatch.com. Under the Connect menu up top, you can download it for free. We give you a complete program that you can customize to your own home and know how to defend it. And if you think you're going to make the best decisions in the middle of the night, when the bad guy's breaking in and you're waking up and you've never practiced any of these things, it's probably not going to work out too much in your favor. All right, Keith, I'll go to you first.
So one thing I want to mention, you talked about avoid large crowds, and I agree with that 100%. But what I also want to talk to people about is churches are going to specifically be targeted. And a lot of people are going to not want to go to church, and that's the wrong thing to do. So if for your church, make sure you show up. You have to have works that show that you're worshiping. Make sure that you have a security team at your church. If your church refuses to have a security team, then just do an informal one amongst you and your homies and have a plan, right? And be aware. You're spot on everything. We have a time period. I always thought that the end of our nation would be something that happened right now, and you had no time to prepare for. This has been a slow burn since 2020.
Yes.
And you've had 4 years now to prepare and to get ready for what's coming up. We've kicked the can down to the end of the road. Those 10 items, they should have been done in 2020. You need to start right now, and no time is better than right now.
You know, Keith, I would add as well that all of the things that we've suggested, even if we're wrong, which I don't believe we are, and, you know, America somehow turns it around and starts thriving again, none of those things are going to leave you in bad stead. So, for example, here's the latest number, which is absolutely crazy. So the previous number that I had was 31% compounded annual inflation for food goods. So the core inflation rate doesn't include food, shelter, or fuel, right? Latest number is 41% for last year was the compounded annual increase in the price of food. So what can you invest your money in and get a compounded 41% ROI on? Absolutely nothing, right? So if you have a freeze dryer, you buy freeze dried food that has a 20, 25, 30-year shelf life, you're going to eat it at some point in time. And you're laughing all the way to the bank, because even if it's 2 years from now, it costs you a third of what it would at that particular point in time. So they're not bad investments. Don, what's your advice? Things people can do right now in light of all this crap.
Well, I would think people's got to watch shows like what you have right here, Chris. You know, to bring it to the big picture, the world picture, I think everything that was said on the show is just so on, and people need to hear it. We were the superpower of this world at one time. You know, the Soviet Union broke apart, 91, early 90s, and now we're the superpower. But now there's three superpowers. There's Russia, China, and us. But China and Russia have formed up, and they've pretty much partnered up pretty much against us. We have a lot of the world against us, and a lot of those people, as we've discussed, have come across, a lot of people from those nations come across into our country. And if I'm 66 years old, I don't think I will see a terrible attack coming up soon, because it's going to happen. And we have to know that's going to happen. We would know it if we paid attention. We're not extremists. We're not extremists at all. We're just telling the facts. And I think the best thing we can do is try to convince people that these facts are there. Be ready. If it doesn't happen, great, but you are better off. But I think it's up to us and people who pay attention to us to help spread the news to our family, friends, and neighbors.
Yeah, I agree, Don. Jeff?
Yeah, on the getting back to the physical fitness thing, a lot of people may say, well, I live in a city and it's high crime and I can't go jog or anything like that. And that may be true. But what you can do is you can take the stairs instead of the elevator. That is a great cardio workout.
Mm-hmm.
You can get a stationary bike, and when you're at home watching the news or watching your favorite show, do it while you're on the bike. I do that. My wife and I, we have a treadmill and a recumbent, bike. We do it every day. And what you're doing is you keep your joints limber, you're keeping your cardio up, you're keeping some muscle tone to you. Because if you've got to walk from your house to your car and you've got to stop to rest, that you're not going to make it. You've got to be able to perform physically, at least at some level. And if you're grossly overweight, that's going to affect you too. So yeah, get in shape. You don't have to be a triathlete. You don't have to be, someone's going to win the decathlon, but you should be able to walk the grocery store aisles and not huff and puff.
You can get exercise bands for next to nothing from multiple different sources. And again, you can adopt Tony Blauer's philosophy. You don't have to put in all the work at the same time. You don't have to go to the gym for an hour or two a day. You can do a couple minutes here and a couple minutes there, and it has a cumulative effect in a very positive manner. You'll notice that in 30 days and 90 days, by the way. If you're sedentary and you start activity at 30 days will be the first threshold. At 90 days, though, is a really big threshold to cross. All right, so let's
Chris,
go to
Chris, what people can do too, real quick, they're on YouTube. Just go on YouTube and do a search for 10-minute exercise.
Yeah.
And there are people doing it for free on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great suggestion. So we'll wrap up a question from the survivalist deck, our conflicted question of the day. If you had lost all of your loved ones and there was nothing else to fight for, how would you keep on surviving the apocalypse? What would drive you to keep on going if all you held dear was already gone? So since I've been going to you first all day, Keith, we'll go to you first again.
Okay. So what I would do is find a family that needs help and then help them. Look, man, you can't help your family. I get it. That sucks. But somebody needs your help. You got skills, you got resources. Go find that family and then go help them survive. That's your purpose.
Wow. Good answer. Don?
Yeah, pretty much. I was thinking the same lines. If you have nothing else to live for and you think that, you're absolutely wrong. You could lose your whole family, all your friends, and everything. You don't know what the future holds. There could be people out there that you can go help. And like people have said before, I don't know where it came from, but in the end, it's going to be okay. If it's not okay, it's not the end. You just keep going. Just keep going. You can never have the attitude of giving up. That's not the combat mindset we want to instill in people. There's something out there you can do that's going to help.
Well said, Don. Jeff?
Well, I think it'd be a combination of one, you think about the pain of you losing your family, and you don't want to inflict that on anybody else. So I would go to try and, to help others so that they don't have to go through the pain that I have. And one thing in particular, if you found a family, and there's a man and he's got a wife and kids. The only thing worse than an adult losing a child would be a child losing their parent in that situation. So I would like to try and find someone where I can say, look, let me do the dirty work. You stay with your family. I'll stand guard tonight. You stay with your kids, and kind of give yourself purpose that way, that you're helping somebody's family stay together and stay intact. It's almost like an homage to your family.
Yeah. That good advice from all of you. My mind went in a completely different direction. I was thinking more so in terms of being isolated. And if that was the case, number one, our dogs are already our family. So they would be of prime importance to me, especially from a camaraderie perspective. But I grew up in the construction industry, and I would start building the biggest, baddest refuge that I possibly could with what was at my disposal. And that would be my purpose, so that hopefully And again, I'm thinking in terms of being isolated, some remote location, that hopefully when good people came along, I've built this thing, where we've got shelter and all the good stuff that goes with it, a garden and everything else. I would set my mind to building. Building is how I would have some sense of purpose, why my feet would still hit the ground running. So that's it. Long episode, but good episode. A lot of great advice. Keith, good to see you again. Try not to wait so long next time, all right?
Sorry.
Well, I don't give a shit what Mike Sterling says. You're all right. We like having so. And because he's not here, I can take that shot. All right. Don and Jeff, appreciate your time as well. Everybody out there, be safe.
Good seeing you all.
Nice seeing you guys.
See you.